Good afternoon, everybody. Today I wanted to do an overview video of investment visas and which investment visa might be the best option for you going into 2026. Good afternoon, everybody. Again, my name is Charles Raether. I'm the managing partner here at AmLaw Group, where for nearly 20 years we've been assisting people such as yourselves in making a successful and convenient transition to the US. And today I'd like to talk about, as we look at the start of 2026, we'd like to look at all the investment visas that are available out there and what might be best for you, and using that investment to acquire either a temporary visa or a green card as a result of that investment. Probably four options that we're looking at: E-2, EB-5, L-1, and EB-1C. EB-1C is kind of the neglected stepchild of the L-1 universe. It's not quite as popular as some of the other options, but is in every respect that if you can qualify for an EB-1C, that oftentimes can also be an effective way to get a green card in the US. So let's start with the easiest options, and we'll work our way up to the more difficult. And usually the easiest ones provide the least benefits, the more difficult ones provide the most benefits. So let's maybe start with E-2. Nothing wrong with E-2s. I love E-2s. Probably 40% of our business is related to E-2 visas. And they're relatively easy to get. And so that's probably why they're so popular. You only have to invest about $100,000. You can open a new business. You can invest in an existing business. There's no requirements about how many employees you have to hire. You don't have to have a business back in your home country. It's a great deal. The only restrictive conditions on an E-2 are the following, I would say. One, it's only available to passport holders of certain countries. Your country has to have an E-2 treaty in effect to qualify. There's probably maybe about 100 treaties in existence, but there are not treaties for people from such large countries as India, China, Russia, and some other jurisdictions. That's one limitation. The other limitation, number two, is E-2 does not provide a green card. So as easy and quick as it is to get an E-2, you can probably from start to finish, depending on how long the line is at the embassy, you could probably, from starting to work with us until getting in for an embassy interview, you could do that as quickly as probably 4 months, maybe 3 months if you're really lucky. But I'd say 4 to 5 months, you can get it all done. Compare that to an EB-5, which can take at least a year, maybe even 2 years or longer. That's very fast. But like I said, the E-2 does not lead you to a green card, and you could be here in an E-2 status for 10 years, and you won't even be one step closer to a green card. However, there is a way to convert over from an E-2 to an EB-5. We'll talk a little bit about that later when we talk about the EB-5s. Next option, again, we're working our way up from the most difficult, from the least difficult to the most difficult on the scale. Next option I would say is the L-1. L-1 is very similar to an E-2. It's a non-immigrant visa. You can get it done pretty quickly, maybe 3-4 months, maybe a little bit longer. But again, similar to the E-2, it does not directly lead to a green card. Although there is an option to get the green card through the EB-1C, and we'll get to that in a little bit. So why do I think the L-1's a little bit more difficult with the E-2? I'm going in progression from least difficult to more. Well, the L-1 is a little bit more difficult primarily because of the requirements it has towards the US company as well as your foreign company. As you recall in the E-2 section I talked about, there's no requirements really about the US company, whether how many employees you hire, and you don't even have to have your own business in your home country. With an L-1, you need to have at least 1 year of experience prior to filing as an executive or as a manager. And we need to show that you had a certain number of direct reports, employees, subordinates in your company overseas, and that you're now coming to the US and you're going to direct your business here. And you're going to have similarly, a similar amount of employees, at least 8 employees, we say, in the US, at the US company. Now, if you're doing an L-1 from scratch, from zero, you don't have to have employees at that start, but they'll only give you the L-1 visa for 1 year. And by the end of that 1 year, you're going to need to have at least probably 8 employees or more at the US company. And keep in mind, the whole time you're in the L-1 status, you need to keep the foreign company active and running with a similar amount of employees and activity as before. You can't just let that thing dry on the vine and disappear or close up. So for this reason, the L-1 is a little bit more difficult than the E-2. Next on our list, I would say probably is the EB-1C. And so the EB-1C is the most direct way to convert from an L-1 to an EB-1C. So the L-1 is very much like the E-2. It doesn't matter how long you're here on an L-1, you will not be one step closer to a green card. But the requirements for the EB-1C are so similar to the L-1 that if people start with an L1 and they do want to get a green card, 9 times out of 10, they will do that through the EB-1C. Just because the requirements are so similar between the L-1 and the EB-1C, usually, if you qualify for the L-1, usually, it really depends on your situation, you can probably qualify for the EB-1C without too much additional effort. But there are some differences that could cause problems for you. I would say the EB-1C is not so popular because it requires a relatively large, actively functioning, profitable company in the US. So what do I mean by at least 10 employees, if not more? Those employees need to be actively employed for probably 6 months prior to making the filing. You need to show that the company is profitable and making enough profit to pay for the applicant's annual salary when he or she is applying for the green card. So again, it's oftentimes difficult for our clients to find a company like that that doesn't cost, say, more than $1 million. Because once you're looking at, buying a business that costs more than $800,000, $900,000, at that point, a lot of our clients might just say, look, I'll go with the EB-5. It's a passive investment. I don't have to worry about running the company. I'm investing the same money. Chances are I'll have an exit for the EB-5 and I'll get my money back, say, in 4, 5, 6 years. So for that reason, I think EB-1C is not quite as popular as it otherwise could be, because it does require an active role by the applicant in running the business, having a minimum number of subordinates, and maintaining that business at the same time maintaining their business overseas. But if you do have a qualifying business, EB-1C could be advantageous for you. The last option, which I guess because it's the last option, it's the most difficult, but I would say it's probably also the most popular, especially among green card applicants who are looking to invest or buy a business in the US. EB-5, I would say, has been experiencing a renaissance since the new law was passed in 2023. The number of applications has steadily gone up and up, and I think we will see that throughout 2026 because the grandfather rules are in effect until September 30th, 2026, meaning nothing, as long as you file your EB-5 petition by end of September 2026, any changes that occur afterwards will not affect you. They raise the price, lower the price, change the requirements, all that stuff. You are protected under the current regulations and laws if you file by September 30th, 2026. So I am sure 2026 is going to be a busy year for EB-5. You probably know the basics of EB-5, but I can go over them just quickly now. You need to make an investment of at least $800,000. If you invest in a rural project, you will get expedited processing, and it's not surprising given this expedited processing. 85% of the applications over the last year or so have been specifically in rural projects because you only have to wait a year. If you invest in an urban project, even if it's a targeted employment area, a TEA, it's at least 2 years, if not longer, because the government, the Immigration Service, is clearly making a clear effort to put a priority on rural projects. So I think what they're doing is they're taking all the rural projects coming in, they're reviewing those ASAP, and if you're in an urban project, they'll get to you, but there's no urgency and there's no guarantee how soon they'll get to you. And so for that reason, I think rural projects are extremely popular. Again, there's the requirements of creating 10 jobs and showing the source of funds. We don't have time to go into all those details, but presuming we can do that. And if you invest in a regional center project, they take care of all the job creation issues. The EB-5 could be a very good option for you. And here's one other reason why EB-5 is so popular, especially among Indian and Chinese applicants. There is so far, as of the time of this filming, there is not retrogression for these set-aside categories of EB-5. So if you're Indian and you're applying for an EB-2, EB-3, even an EB-1A, or even an EB-1C, there's a wait time that you're going to have to wait a couple years before you're able to move forward. That is not the case for EB-5, and that's why for some nationalities, EB-5 is probably the best and probably the only option that is available for them. Again, hopefully this information was beneficial for you. We look forward to working with you and interacting with you as 2026 goes forward. If you have any questions, feel free to leave those comments below or questions. But better yet, if you're considering making the move and making the decision in 2026, especially for EB-5, now is the time to move while there's still available time and before the rules might change or even get more complicated. Again, this was Charles Raether. I look forward to seeing you in our next episode.